What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another 60 feet 6 inches, your fantasy baseball home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can obviously follow me at Notorious KRO on Twitter. With me once again is Ben Rolfe. What's up, Ben?
Not much, Kyle. Looking forward to talking about the depths of outfield. I've been thinking about this position a lot because I did my rankings today in preparation for this. I put a kind of final list together, and my kind of feeling on the position is that it's kind of there's some good guys in the top 5 or 6. You've got some real upside options. Then in like what we'd call tier 3. Then you come to some sort of interesting options with the names of like Upton, Yelich, and Kane. Then all of a sudden it gets quite dicey. You've got names like Rhys Hoskins and through to like Kevin Kiermaier. I all kind of put them in one tier. And then you get some more sort of interesting options. And then it kind of it becomes a crapshoot. And that's my concern with outfield. Just to sort of start off the podcast that way is that I like some high up options, and I feel like there's some interesting options that you can get sort of mid to late rounds, but I also feel there's a lot of crapshoot. And like I've been saying, I'm in the middle of a slow keeper draft, and I see a lot of outfielders get drafted. Like, I can't think who the guy was today, but I just found myself going, "Oh, really?" Like, just questioning what the upside was there. And I know like Corey Dickerson, someone's drafted him as a starting outfielder, and I just found myself wincing with some of the picks. And that's kind of how I feel with outfield. Is there's decent guys, but there's also some real gambles that might backfire.
So are you more into I'm going to try and get a couple studs locked in early and then fill out my outfield when I get into the late ends rounds of the draft, as opposed to, kind of being a little more patient and grabbing guys as you go along?
Yeah, so strategy kind of will depend if you're in a 5 outfielder league or a 3 outfielder league. So the only 5 outfielder league I've done in terms of a real draft where I've not been sort of trying things was a keeper league where I already had Upton and Martinez locked in as first 8 round picks. And so actually that draft fell a bit nice because I had some really high value picks and I could take some gambles earlier. For me, it's a case of getting the guys that are good value. We talked a lot in the previous podcast about Lorenzo Cain. I feel like he's a perfect guy to get as a good value. So lock in maybe a top 10-ish kind of guy, then lock in a good value in the next 10 to 15, and then just see how the value falls and try and balance the categories. This is the perfect position to balance categories out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to be a little more patient. I'm a little higher on some of these guys, and obviously it really depends on what you need. Do you need power? Do you need speed? Do you looking for a bit of both? Maybe some average? That will kind of help dictate where to lean in some of these names. But I'm going to read off a chunk, and I want you just to pick out a name or two that you're really excited about or maybe really scared of for this season. So we'll start Gregory Polanco, Adam Eaton, Eddie Rosario, Manuel Margot, Jay Bruce, Nomar Mazara, Brett Gardner, Adam Duvall, Steven Souza, Kevin Kiermaier, Michael Conforto, Ronald Acuna, Josh Reddick, Kyle Schwarber. That gets us to about the top 40. And if you want to follow along, you're listening to the podcast. I know that was a lot of names, but we're just using ESPN's live draft results to kind of get an idea of where some of these players are going. So you can kind of look at some of those names and see some of the ones we're talking about. But Ben, was there a name that kind of stood out among the rest as a guy you're really excited about for this year?
I'm interested to see what upside Nomar Mazara is going to offer this year. I think he's got the pedigree to do something really, really special. I mean, in Texas, it's a good hitting environment. He's only 22, and he's impressed in each of his first 2 years. 101 RBIs last year. If he could just get that average up now and get it into the 270s, then I think there's a real 25 home run upside here. He's a guy I'm really excited to draft and just take a flyer on as a third, fourth kind of outfielder. But the guy who's got the potential to be, let's say the Oakland Chris Davis is Kyle Schwarber, and I wrote an article last year saying how he was overpriced, and I wasn't wrong in that case. He was being drafted based on half a season's work where he'd excelled, and he really let people down last year. But I also think you have to take into account he is only 24. He came up through the minor leagues as a catcher, which is always tough for a hitter to develop. He spends so much time learning to catch that you don't get time necessarily to focus on your hitting the way that other guys do. But now he's a full-time outfielder. I think there's every possibility that we can see a guy that hits 30 plus home runs and can get that average back up into that 250 kind of range. He has the upside to be the Chris Davis in Oakland. He really does. But it all needs to fall right for him this year.
Yeah, Schwarber is a very interesting guy. I don't know if you guys have seen him this year, but um, the shape he's in, it's night and day. He's incredible shape. He's running. He's got some speed. Like he had 2 stolen bases in one game earlier this spring. But I mean, he's literally dropped like 50 pounds, and he looks much more like Chris Bryant as opposed to like Bartolo Colon, like he's looked like in the past season or two. So, for a guy that is really committed, that actually looks like a professional athlete, that seems to be, very interested in getting back to kind of what he was a couple of years ago. That's a guy that's very interesting to me, and a guy that I'm excited to maybe take a shot on, maybe take a couple shots on, because the upside's obviously there. If he's maybe the power is more like 20-25 home runs, but if he gets you 10 to 15 steals, that could be a very interesting player. And if he's healthy and looking good and moving well, he may play more, and Madden may be more inclined to leave him in later in games. So Schwarber is definitely a name that stands out. The other name I want to talk about is Ronald Acuna. Ben, I guess, last year we obviously had both Aaron Judge and Cody Bellinger pop up and be tremendous out of the gate. Is there a guy, or I guess in terms of general strategy, do you want to not overrate those guys and say because those guys came up and were so special that we should not just grab any young prospect we expect to be really good? Or do you think that you're more willing to kind of take a shot on potential upside by drafting a guy like Acuna?
So the difference between Acuna and Judge and Bellinger is where they were drafted. I feel like Judge and Bellinger went undrafted in a lot of leagues, or very late round picks, just because they were kind of upside plays. Whereas Acuna now, if he isn't spectacular, that is feeling like it might be a disappointment, because at this stage, he is the 38th pure outfielder off the board in ESPN, and what that means is that he doesn't have to be Lorenzo Cain, but he has to be decent still. And I mean, last year he did steal, I'm just doing the maths in my head, 44 bases across 3 different levels and hit 21 home runs while hitting anywhere ranging from 287 in A+ to 344 in AAA. It just got better as the year went on. It was insane. He's got to be amazing, and there's something about the fact that as he climbed from single A up to AAA, his strikeout rate cut from 30% to 20%. I know we're talking 120 plate appearances here, so we're talking small sample sizes, but some of it just feels like he's not going to be this can't miss guy that everybody thinks. But I'm always the one who's hesitant on a prospect, and it bites me in the ass. And then when I do buy in on a prospect like Lewis Brinson, he ends up not being as good in the years I buy into him as I want him to be, and then it bites me in the ass. So I never seem to do the right things with these prospects. So I'm a little bit down on Acuna. I think you should just put all your money on him, because I'm down on him slightly.
Yeah, it is definitely a gamble, but for a guy that is going, if I could get him as after the pick 150, if I can get him 160, 170, I think it's worth taking a shot, especially if you feel like you can add somebody late. We're going to get into some of our favorite sleeper options later, but, we were talking about Cameron Maybin, for example, earlier. If you can get Cameron Maybin to start, and then you can have Acuna to come in and play once he gets called up and starts playing most days, and I think the Braves will do that once he kind of gets over the service time issue. That could be a tremendous upside, and, you don't want to pick every prospect and put him in the box and say, well, he's a prospect, so he's got tremendous upside and let's do it. But there is special guys, and I think he's one of them. And I don't know. I would be willing to take a shot on him for sure.
Yeah, he's a guy worth having a shot on. Definitely, I see what you're saying. If you can pick out and circle guys later on that were like the guys we're going to talk about soon, then by all means grab him as a what he'd be at worst a third outfielder, but at best a fourth kind of thing. So I can see it.
Yep. Anybody else in that range? Manuel Margot. That's a guy I'm really excited about this year. Especially if he hits at the top of that Padres lineup, that all of a sudden looks better with Will Myers and Eric Hosmer, and he could be a guy that if you're looking for steals, could be a great name to target.
Yeah, he absolutely could be, and he's causing me real headaches at the moment because we're locking in our keepers for our podcast keeper league this week, and I'm I'm having a real headache over who to keep, and it might be a good time to talk this sort of through because this will give people an idea of like where we value players. So I'm just pulling them up now. So I got now, of course, my computer freezes. That's just always the way it works, isn't it, in these situations?
100%.
So I've got Manuel Margot, and I think he's about a 22nd round option, so pretty low. But I've also got Marcell Ozuna at a good value. I've got Will Myers at in the 20s. I've got Gene Segura at round 18. Travis Shaw at round 19. Javier Baez at round 27. Steven Souza at round 28, and Trey Mancini at round 27. Like, who out of those guys do you get rid of to keep Manuel Margot in the 23rd round? It's so tough to balance that value because with these steals guys, they can always disappoint.
Yeah, no, they can, especially for a guy that you need to be on base. If he's hitting 250, 260 like that, there's just going to be less opportunities. Where if he was hitting closer to 300, then he'd be on base a lot more, and 20, 25 steals would be definitely in the realm of outcomes. You could just trade him to me, and then I could keep him, and we can make it a great deal.
Yeah, I think people might call foul on that. My concern is that he only had 17 stolen bases in 529 plate appearances last year. And I mean, we have seen in the Red Sox organization where he had 39 and 33 early on, and he had 30 in 2016 at AAA for the Padres. But I do just wonder if there might be some hesitation to let him run for some reason. But maybe if the Padres think they've got a good team this year, and they think they've got a shot at doing something this year, they might try and manufacture runs. But I don't know why they would risk him too much on the base path this year if it's not going to be for a potential playoff spot.
Yeah, no, I think 20 to 25 steals is probably fair. Maybe 20, 22, something like that. But he needs to get that average up closer to 270, 280. But if he hits 265 with 10 to 15 home runs and 20, 25 steals, that'd be a really nice season, a really nice player, and a guy I would be definitely excited to own for sure.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, and he's always going to get pushed up because of the steals. I mean, the 30th outfielder off the board feels a bit rich for me, but if you need steals, I can see why you'd reach for him.
Yeah, and it seems like that's kind of a constant theme of speed guys getting pushed up the draft board for sure. I'm going to read off another list of 10 or so names, and let me know who stands out to you. Max Kepler, Delino DeShields, Avisail Garcia, Corey Dickerson, Melky Cabrera, Steven Piscotty, Jose Bautista, Dexter Fowler, Jackie Bradley Jr., and Sin-Shu Chu. Is there a name or two that really grab your attention?
Well, I think Corey Dickerson is being drafted just based off what he's done in the past. The same with Bautista, because Dickerson is a platoon player right now. Bautista's a free agent, and I don't actually know who's interested in him. Kepler's a guy that I struggled. I wonder if there's going to be a struggle for playing time somewhere there. Minnesota's got a very good team, and that concerns me. I have to say it's a pretty bad group. I probably wouldn't take any of them other than maybe Delino DeShields, but even then he feels way overdrafted compared to other guys that I think can offer you decent steals. That is a weird group between 40 and 50, and it's a group I am largely going to stay away from at those prices.
Yeah, I guess the only one that really is interesting to me is Stephen Piscotty. Obviously, last season was a terrible, terrible one for him, but he was dealing with a lot of stuff off the field. His mother was really sick, and obviously had his mind elsewhere. Now he's in Oakland, close to his mom. Hopefully, that'll help him kind of ease his concerns a little bit when he's playing. I mean, 2 years ago, this was a guy who hit 20 homers, had 85 RBI and 86 runs, stole 7 bases and hit 270. If we can get a guy that hits 270, 280 with 20 and 10 and puts up some decent RBI and runs, he could be a guy that outkicks kind of where he's going. And that could be, if I'm taking a shot on anybody in this group, he would be the one that would make the most sense. And he's going at pick player 200 right now. I think that's a good gamble.
Yeah, it's a gamble, but I like some guys going in the next category a bit quicker. So if I read through them, I've got Odubel Herrera ranked higher than him. I've got Odubel Herrera ranked up with Adam Eaton wherever he was going. I feel like we've mentioned him at some point.
Yeah.
We I don't know what Matt Kemp is doing at 52. I have serious concerns about him. I like Mark Trumbo for just power upside. Aaron Hicks is a more intriguing name to me. Kevin Pillar, I want nothing to do with. Cole Calhoun is a sleeper for me this year. He's a guy I really think can do well, and he's going pick 213. I'm going to gamble on him there, and I've seen him fall further in drafts for sure. Scott Schebler, I worry about the playing time. Bradley Zimmer is an interesting one, but I feel like that Cleveland outfield could get a bit messy. Michael Brantley's a huge upside play at the 59th outfielder off the board at 220. And again, Carlos Gonzalez, I think at 60 is being drafted based on name value, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it is like Matt Kemp and Mark Trumbo and Carlos Gonzalez. These are guys that, in past seasons have been top three, top five round players that are barely top 50 outfielders. And that does happen. Guys will kind of get picked because, oh, I know that name, especially when you get down this low. I think Kevin Pillar is interesting, especially if you need a little speed. But other than that, I don't know if there's anybody that I'm crazy excited about in this chunk.
No, in general, it's not a great chunk. I'd like to say I think Odubel Herrera is he's very underrated. Just he gives you a good balance of stats, and I like that in a guy. Um, I just think that there's more upside now later in drafts, and this is what I kind of mean in that I'm probably going to aim to get a couple of guys in the top 20, somebody in that, probably one or two guys in that Mazzara, Margot, Souza, Kiermaier kind of range, and then I'm probably going to stay away, and then I'm going to dip back in for names like the deep guys, like we touched on Cameron Maybin, who could be an absolute beast if he gets it going. I mean, there's a fair chance he's going to lead off every day in Miami, and
Yep. I would
they're
say
going to
that,
have to
assuming he's healthy, he should be leading off every day.
yeah, and I don't see what they're going to save him for. I don't see them saving him for anything because
Yeah.
why? He's not their centre fielder of the future. That's possibly Lewis Brinson. So I think Cameron Raymond could run a lot. I think 30 to 40 steals is possible. I think he could go higher. The only thing I'm worried about is what average do we see? Do we see that 250, 260 average where it's acceptable, or do we see that bottom line 210, 220 average? And if we see that 210, 220, you'll find yourself dropping him. But if we see that high average, then there's every opportunity. Is there anyone down sort of, let's say
Well,
60 and on that you like?
I want to start with Scott Schebler before we jump on to the next group.
Okay.
I think he's an interesting name. Obviously, he hit 30 homers last year. Has the power upside, but I think with the lineup and the Reds kind of just getting better in general, maybe he hits 20 like 25 home runs, 26 home runs, but then maybe the RBI and runs totals, those numbers go from, instead of being in the 60s, maybe he can hit in the, close to 80 for each. And now we're talking about a guy who with 25 home runs, 160, 170 runs and RBIs, and maybe he hits 240, 250. Like, is that a guy that's interesting to you? Especially if, say, you start, more, you focus on speed a little early, and you lock in Trey Turner or D Gordon or whatever, and you need, oh, I'm a little light on power. I need to add in some potential. Is he a guy when you're getting down this far that would be interesting as a kind of third, fourth, fifth outfielder?
Possibly, just because you're right, he has got the power upside, but I do worry about him ending up being the odd man out there with.
Hmm.
I feel like Duval is always going to play in front of him. I feel Billy Hamilton's going to play in front of him, and is it Jesse Winker,
Yeah.
the other guy in that outfield? I feel like he could replace Shebler, especially if Shebler starts off slow, which is more than possible. So I'm going to end up ranking him much closer to sort of the mid 80s kind of range. He's going to be a bench player for me. Just you're right, a bench player with upside, but he's more of a bench player for me than a fifth outfielder.
Yeah, like I'm looking at the projected starting lineup, and according to Roster Resource, they have Winker in left, they have Billy Hamilton in center, so that leaves right and third base, and Shebler is going to be in right, and Suarez at third. So, Adam Duvall's kind of seems like the odd man out. I think he'll find plenty of at bats, especially the way he played last year. But yeah, it maybe if he comes back. Instead of hitting 530 plate appearances, he'll get like 465 like Steamer has. But that could, yeah, I don't know. Maybe his counting numbers are coming down, and for good reason. Um, I guess for my question for you is, there's names like David Dahl, like some of these. This is kind of where Jesse Winkers in the '80s, Clint Frazier, like how Derek Fisher. How do you consider, okay, these young players with tremendous upside? Is this where you're comfortable to start taking shots on what could be, or are you still trying to solidify your outfield a little bit more with David Peralta's or Nick Markakis or Curtis Granderson, whatever it may be, like kind of how do you debate that with when you're drafting and all that good stuff?
It does depend how you feel on your team. If you've taken a lot of upside early on and you've taken a lot of risk, you might want to get that safety. But in rotor leagues, especially where you win rotor leagues, is upside. You finishing fifth in every category is no good. We've talked about
Yeah.
that a lot. You need to aim to try and win some categories. And if you're short on the things that Dahl, Renfro, Aaron Altair, Mitch Haniger, if you're short on the things those guys offer, gamble on it. Victor Robles, I worry about because I just don't think he's going to get enough playing time with Michael Taylor. But I mean, by all means, pick your guys. If you think Eloy Jimenez is going to be up, if you think it's Derek Fisher that's going to take um, the Yuli Gurriel hole that's been left, if you think Jorge Soler is going to have his breakout year, then get them on your bench and keep an eye on them.
Yeah.
I mean, it absolutely disgusts me that Tim Tebow is the 97th outfielder ranked
That's just
on
stupid.
ESPN
That's just
ADP. I'm
stupid.
hoping that's just simply ESPN being ESPN. But
No,
if
it's
it,
just
but
stupid people drafting Tim Tebow because they can't draft him in football anymore, so they have to draft him in baseball.
I do like the idea though that Tim Tebow might just come up in September to sell tickets for the Mets. I think that could be fun to watch. Um,
Should we order Damien a Tim Tebow jersey?
oh, it would be funny, wouldn't it? And I mean, today we saw Russell Wilson take an at bat, or
Oh
was
my
it like
god.
yesterday he took an at bat for the Yankees?
Yeah,
And
yeah, I don't.
I agreed 100% with what people were saying on Twitter that if you're the Seahawks, you have to be fuming about that because anything can happen in that situation. You imagine if he flicked
Takes
one of
a
those into his face or something like that,
Yeah,
and
or
something
takes it to
serious
the
happened.
wrist, and all of a sudden he's broken wrist on his throwing arm, and now he's out and not ready for camp. Like, yeah, that's crazy. But yeah,
So
I mean, like I'm looking like Jesse Winker, or Derek Fisher instead of Gerardo Parra, or Hunter Pence. Like I think, and like you said, it depends on your team a little bit, but like I think I'd rather take the shot on the potential upside, knowing that I can probably find an outfielder that can reasonably outproduce a lot of these veteran type names. I give shout outs to the Fantasy Sports Network. They've been I'm trying to remember if it's Michael Florio or Frank over at Fantasy Sports, but they were talking about Jorge Solar, and this is still a guy that we really liked that had potential upside. He's going to be in Kansas City. He should be playing every day. When you're looking down beyond 250, if you need some potential power, like, is he a guy that interests you, or do you think that kind of upside run is probably over?
No, I think there's upside there. I mean, we're still talking about a guy who was like neck and neck with Chris Bryant in the minors for the Cubs. Like they didn't know who was going to be the one, and it just so happened. I feel like that there was a spot at third base before there was a spot in the outfield, and so Bryant came up first, kind of thing. I feel like if things had fallen slightly differently, there's every possibility we could be talking about Chris Bryant in Kansas City and Soler still in Chicago, and who knows how that might have turned out. It's quite funny to think when you consider these kind of things. I think he's a guy I'd take a gamble on. I think there's real. Uh, I mean, you wouldn't be shocked. Okay, you might because of the park, but you wouldn't be shocked if park adjusted, he did what Aaron Judge did last year because he's capable of doing it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think there's definitely a lot of stuff to be interested there, and I think if I'm drafting and I'm late and I want to take a shot, and especially if I'm comfortable with where my outfield is, or knowing that I can get somebody in a couple of rounds to kind of fill out my outfield if things go poorly. Is there anybody else that Jerks and Profars down there, Brett Phillips, like, is there anybody as we kind of go down, like, in the hundreds that you think this guy is probably about 20 spots lower than he probably should be, or even 10?
I feel if you're looking for safety, this is really boring, but Alex Gordon is quite low. I feel talking staying in Kansas City, we've got Jorge Bonifacio who could be interesting. Teoscar Hernandez offers a bit of speed upside in Toronto. Charlie Tilson could hit at the top of that White Sox lineup. How good it's going to be is a different matter. Profar, I think I struggle to see if the upside is still there with Profar. I mean, Steve Pearce in Toronto could have his day. And on the subject of Toronto, it's interesting to see that Troy Tulowitzki is already going to be on the DL.
Shocker.
Yeah, just doubling back up. I think Lewis Brinson is a great gamble this year. I'm never gonna leave the Lewis Brinson train, but just think that he could play a lot in Miami this year. They've got no reason to demote him. They might as well give him as many at bats as they can and let him learn that park and let him adjust to it in the majors. And I think he might just get you solid fantasy production by sheer weight of numbers by the end of the year as much as anything. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if come the end of the year he's a startable fantasy option with. He's got 2020 upside if he can work out how to hit home runs in that park. So he's definitely an interesting name.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on some of those for sure. Okay, this was a lot of fun. Good to catch up. Good to talk some guys that are kind of lower on the order. Next week we'll be back talking pitchers, starting pitchers. Is that
Yeah.
kind of, yep, we'll be back talking starters. So hit us up on our personal Twitter at Notorious KRO, at Ben Rolfe 15 if there's certain guys you want especially discussed. We'll do kind of like this where we'll talk probably a top 25 starter type show, and then we'll talk the rest of the streamers and pick and choose matchups and those kind of guys. If you missed the first part of this podcast where we talked about the elite options at the position, make sure you go back and check that out. If you've missed any of our position previews, talking catcher, first base, second base, we talked a labor mixed draft. I'm sure we'll have all kinds of good stuff coming up as well. But for Ben Rolfe, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.